So Aisling, can you tell us what sedimentation is and why it's a problem in rivers?
So sedimentation, we're usually talking about the fine grained sediments like silt and clay, and if there's an excess of these in the system, they can clog up the little spaces between the gravel where lots of little invertebrates live, and also where fish like to lay their eggs. And then specifically if you think about really sensitive species like the freshwater pearl mussel, they're very sensitive to excess silt in the system. Also, if you get an awful lot of silt in the system, it might start to be dispersed in the water column, and then the light isn't penetrating through the water, and your primary producers that photosynthesize can't, they need the light to photosynthesize, and then everything else in the river, they're at the bottom of the food chain, so our little mayfly grazers and things like that, they need their little algae to graze on and all the rest.
Okay, so how do we test for sedimentation in the river? Are there any obvious signs that, say if you're looking into the water that you could see, that's, there's too much sediment in there and that's a problem?
Yeah, well, what we would do when we get to the river, best case scenario, you have a good idea of what the river would naturally look like, or usually looks like, and then you might look at the substrate. So depending on where you are in the river system, it can be more silty. So further down the river system, say further towards the sea, the river's slower, it's going to be depositing more silt. But up in the mountains and up towards the top of the system, you're typically going to be seeing cobbles and boulders and gravel. So if you're seeing a fine layer of silt, or if you're seeing silt deposited in pools or in areas where the water might be slowing down a bit, you'd look at the depth of it, and then you'd be really worried if you started to see silt deposited, say in riffles or glides or runs where the water runs quite quickly and typically is more of an eroding flow. So if you're seeing silt there, you know that something's getting into the system that's silting it up, and it's not really a natural situation.
And what kind of things would cause it to silt up? What's happening upstream that would cause the river to silt up?
So especially drainage in poorly draining areas and in peaty areas. So if you've an awful lot of drainage directly to the river, it's eroding, the soil is being eroded down and brought in, and not really naturally, kind of excessively. Also, if there's a lot of alteration or channelization sometimes to the natural course of the river, say if it's over deepened or over widened, you might get bank erosion, or then you might spoil heaps that are put up on the bank side could be contributing to it. So often it's from the river bank, but I suppose it's your fine silts and clays. They're the ones that are going to get in and choke up the system.
And so what kind of things could we do to prevent sedimentation?
Well, I suppose you're kind of thinking along your slow the flow idea. So if you're draining a piece of land, just to be cognizant when you get close to the river that maybe there's sometimes people put in silt traps or maybe little pond features, so that it's not kind of a quick flow that's bringing quite a lot of sediment down, so that when it reaches the river, that maybe the soil has naturally filtered out some of that silt and clay.
And do trees help with that? Would the shrubs plant along the bank side? Okay,
yeah.
So they would.
So if you've got a healthy riparian zone, if you just imagine the water flowing over, a lot of those silts and clays are going to settle out around the roots and around the soil. So by the time it gets to the river, it's kind of sieving out some of that stuff.
So Aisling, what are we going to do with this jar now?
We're just going to take a sample from the water column just to see if there's any suspended sediment or silts that are in the water column.
And so would you say that's a clear sample?
Yeah, so you can see that you can see through it quite well, and there's not very many bits of suspended silt or clay.
And what about the colour?
So the colour is natural. We're in a peaty area here, so it's natural to have a bit of coloration in the water.